The decade between 50 and 60 is the most financially loaded 10 years of your entire life, and most people spend it doing the wrong things with great discipline. Here is what nobody tells you about that window. The math doesn't just favor people who start early. It punishes people who get the final approach wrong at a level that savings rate alone cannot fix. Today, I'm walking you through exactly why your 50s are the moment the whole movie either comes together or falls apart. And I'm going to show you the specific mechanisms, not platitudes, not generic advice, the actual levers that separate the people who retire comfortably from the ones who end up quietly panicking at 68. The median retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 is $185,000. That is not a typo, not average, median. The number that represents the person in the exact middle of the distribution. Meanwhile, the amount Americans believe they need for a comfortable retirement in 2025 is $1.26 million. So the typical person within a decade of retirement has roughly 1/7 of what they think they need. And most of them are still thinking the problem is that they didn't start soon enough. That is the wrong diagnosis. And a wrong diagnosis leads to the wrong treatment. I've spent the last decade running my own business, surrounded by accountants and tax attorneys who deal with people's money every single day. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested personally. And what I've learned from the boring documents, the SEC filings, the actual actuarial tables is that the 50s are not a decade of catching up. They are a decade of not screwing up what you already have. That distinction sounds subtle. It is not. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the specific weak points in your plan, and I only ask for your email to send the report so I don't store any of your financial data. Link is in the description. Here is the central metaphor I want you to hold in your mind for the next 20 minutes. An airplane taking off needs a minimum runway length to reach the speed required for flight. Too short a runway and the physics do not care about your intentions. You simply do not clear the trees at the end. Your 50s are that runway. Everything before was building the plane. Everything after depends on whether you actually get airborne. The decisions made between 50 and 60 determine your takeoff speed. And here is the thing nobody says out loud. You can shorten your own runway with completely legal, financially conventional, deeply stupid decisions. Shorten the runway and you don't clear the trees. We'll come back to that. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the single most counterintuitive threat to your retirement, a risk that has nothing to do with how much you saved and everything to do with calendar luck. But first, here is why the savings picture is even more broken than you think. Over half of American households, 54%, report having no dedicated retirement savings at all, according to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. Which means the moment you even have something saved, you are already ahead of the majority of the country. That sounds like good news. It is not good news. It just means the crisis is bigger than the media is willing to say clearly. Here is the number that actually matters. Vanguard's own data for 401k plans shows Americans aged 55 to 64 have an average balance of $271,320, but a median of only $95,642. Average versus median. Two radically different pictures of reality. The average is inflated by people with $2 million at the top. The median tells you what the person sitting in the middle of the room actually has, $95,000. With 1 to 15 years left before they stop working, you think the problem is that people didn't save enough. The real problem is that most people don't know what they actually have, what they actually need, or what the gap actually looks like in practical terms on the ground. The math is not abstract. The average American household spends $77,280 every single year. If you have $95,000 saved and you retire at 65, basic arithmetic tells you that money is gone in approximately 14 months. And that's before healthcare. Fidelity's 2025 retiree healthcare cost estimate reveals that a 65-year-old retiring this year can expect to spend an average of $172,500 in healthcare and medical expenses throughout retirement. The average American, meanwhile, estimates those costs will be about $75,000, less than half of Fidelity's calculation. When Fidelity first started tracking these numbers back in 2002, the estimate was $80,000. We have witnessed a 115% increase in just over 2 decades. And this is where it gets really interesting. 1 in 5 Americans say they have never considered healthcare needs during retirement, and among Generation X, that number rises to 1 in 4. These are not people who are irresponsible. These are people who are optimistic in a way that the data does not support. They are building a financial plan with a gaping hole in the middle of it, and the hole is the size of a new car every 4 years for 20 years. Fidelity's estimate does not even include long-term care expenses. The $172,000, that's just the Medicare bills, the co-pays, the prescriptions, nursing home, memory care, physical therapy from the things that break when you're 82. Those are extra. 69% of people turning 65 today will need some form of long-term care during their lifetime. So we're talking about a cost that the majority of people will face, that almost nobody has planned for, that the primary estimate doesn't include. A friend of mine, I won't say his name, watched his father retire at 62 in reasonable financial shape. The number on paper looked okay. Then his father had a minor stroke at 71. Not catastrophic, but enough to require assisted living. The family was not prepared. His mother had to sell the house. His father lived another 11 years. The runway they thought they had was not the runway they actually had. Now, here is the good news buried in all of this. If you're in your 50s, and especially your early 50s, there is a specific mechanism the government created that most people actively ignore. When you hit your 50s, you become eligible to make larger contributions toward your retirement accounts. These are called catch-up contributions. If you contribute the annual limit of $23,500 plus your catch-up contribution of $7,500, that is a total of $31,000 in tax-advantaged money you could be funneling toward retirement each year. As of 2025, workers aged 60 to 63 can contribute an extra $11,250 to their 401k each year through a new increased catch-up provision. So at 60 to 63, we are talking about a possible annual contribution of $34,750, all tax-advantaged. Most people don't know this exists. But now you might think, is that really going to move the needle that much? Let me give you an answer that isn't vague. If you start making those maximum catch-up contributions at $50,000, $31,000 a year, and you earn a 7% average annual return, over 15 years, that's approximately $800,000 from contributions and growth alone. $800,000 for doing the most boring, legal, government-approved thing possible. No PICs, no crypto, no leverage ETFs. Only 15% of people aged 55 to 64 even have a health savings account. And of that group, more than half don't know it can be used as a retirement savings vehicle. The catch-up contribution plus HSA combination is the most powerful 1 to 2 punch available to someone in their 50s, and almost nobody is throwing both punches. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content, otherwise YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. You think the danger to your retirement is that you don't have enough money saved. The real danger is that you could have exactly the right amount of money saved and still run out before you die. And the mechanism responsible for that is something called sequence of returns risk. And it is the most underappreciated financial threat that exists for people in the decade before and the decade after retirement. Here's the setup. 2 people, same age, same starting balance, same average return over 30 years, same withdrawal amount, different outcome. One ends the simulation with $3 million. The other goes bankrupt at year 26. The only variable is the order in which the good and bad years arrive. Sequence of returns risk is the danger that the timing of investment losses early in retirement will permanently reduce how long your savings last. Unlike general market risk, sequence risk specifically affects people who are withdrawing money from their portfolio. When you sell investments during a downturn to cover living expenses, those shares are gone forever and cannot participate in any recovery. This is worth sitting with for a second. During your working years, the order of returns does not matter much. A 20% loss followed by a 25% gain produces a similar result as the reverse, because you're not pulling money out. But once withdrawals begin, early losses compound in a way that later gains simply cannot undo. Research by Wade Pfau estimates that approximately 77% of a portfolio's final retirement outcome can be explained by the returns of just the first 10 years. 77%. Let that land. The first decade of retirement is not one phase among many. It is the dominant determining factor in whether your money survives as long as you do. And your 50s are when you are marching directly toward that window. Sequence of returns risk is most acute in what researchers call the fragile decade, the 5 years before and 5 years after retirement begins. During this window, the portfolio is typically at its peak size. A severe market downturn can wipe out years of accumulated gains very quickly. Unlike during the accumulation phase, there are no future contributions to average down the cost base. Once withdrawals begin, compounding shifts from working for you to working against you. A man named George, a composite built from real case patterns I've studied, not anyone specific, retired in early 2007 with just under $900,000 in his 401k. He was 62. He felt great about the number. His financial advisor told him he was in good shape. His plan was to withdraw $40,000 a year to supplement a modest Social Security check. Then 2008 happened. The S&P 500 dropped 57% from peak to trough. George did not panic sell. He held on. He did exactly what you're supposed to do, but the withdrawals still happened. He had to sell shares at the bottom to fund his life. The portfolio recovered in the market, but George's withdrawals meant he was selling at the lows, permanently removing capital that could not participate in the recovery. By 68, his balance was lower than it had been the day he retired. Not because of his choices in the crash, because he was at exactly the wrong point in the sequence. Let us say you retire with $1 million and plan to withdraw 4% annually. If the market declines 20% in your first year, your portfolio drops to $800,000, and your next withdrawal represents a larger percentage of what remains. That snowball effect can shorten your retirement horizon by years. This is where most people's thinking breaks. They believe the solution is to just pick better investments or hold more stocks for higher returns. But the sequence problem is not about the average. It is about the timing. A higher average return with worse timing is actually worse than a lower average return with better timing. The math is genuinely cruel. The good news is that this risk is not random fate. It is manageable. But you have to build the management structure before you need it, which means now, in your 50s, I'll show you exactly what that looks like in the mini case study in a few minutes. But first, let me introduce someone. His name is Marcus. He is 54. He has $420,000 in his 401k, a paid-off car, no credit card debt, and a plan to retire at 62. He makes $92,000 a year, has been maxing his contributions for the last 6 years, and genuinely believes he is on track. His friends ask him for financial advice at dinner parties. He enjoys giving it. And somewhere around the midpoint of this video, Marcus is going to realize that his plan has a structural flaw that could cost him 11 years of financial security, not because he did anything reckless, but because he optimized for the wrong variable. We'll come back to Marcus. Now, Social Security. Let's talk about the most misunderstood government program in the history of government programs. Full retirement age is now 67 for anyone born in 1960 or later. Claiming at 62 instead of 67 cuts benefits by 30% for life, permanently. Not a temporary adjustment, not something you can appeal. You get a 30% smaller check every month from the day you claim until the day you die. If you delay taking your benefits from your full retirement age up to age 70, your benefit amount will increase and you will earn delayed retirement credits that will increase your monthly payment by about 8% per year. Delaying benefits until 70 increases monthly payments by 24% above the standard amount. So let's do the math that matters. If your standard benefit at full retirement age is $2,000 a month, which is close to the current average, your options look like this. Claim at 62, $1,400 a month. Claim at 67, $2,000. Claim at 70, $2,480. That is a difference of $1,080 per month between claiming at 62 and claiming at 70. Over a 20-year retirement from age 70 to 90, that is $259,000, $200 more in lifetime income by waiting 8 years to claim. No investing required, no risk, just patience and a different date on a form. But here is the psychological trap that destroys people. They watch their account during their 60s and they see the market bouncing around. They worry. They think, I should start taking Social Security now while I can. That feeling is exactly backward. Your Social Security benefit is a guaranteed, inflation-adjusted annuity backed by the federal government. The COLA for 2026 is 2.8%. It adjusts every year with inflation. You cannot buy a comparable private product for anything close to what you're leaving on the table by claiming early. Most people think the Social Security decision is a question of when to start the income stream. It's actually a question of how large a permanent income floor you want for the rest of your life. Those are fundamentally different questions with fundamentally different answers. The conventional wisdom says to claim early if you need the money, claim late if you don't. That is wrong. The correct framing is claim late if you can possibly avoid claiming early, because you are buying the cheapest inflation-protected longevity insurance that exists. Your other assets carry market risk. Your Social Security benefit, if you wait, does not. There is a woman in Minnesota, I read about this case in a Morningstar paper, who claimed at 62 because her husband told her they needed the money to pay down the house. They didn't actually need the money. They felt uncomfortable having the debt. So they permanently reduced her Social Security by 30% for the next 24 years until she died at 86 in exchange for paying off a mortgage 8 years earlier. The cost of that decision, measured in foregone monthly income over her lifetime, was approximately $212,000. The mortgage they paid off early was $94,000. They lost over $100,000 in net terms to get rid of a psychological discomfort. The feeling won, the math lost. Here's the thing that nobody else is telling you about the Social Security timing decision. It is also a healthcare planning problem. Approximately 1/3 of early retirees who claim Social Security at age 62 do so to help pay for healthcare expenses until they are eligible for Medicare at age 65. So the decision to claim early is often driven not by a real financial strategy, but by a healthcare gap they didn't plan for. The tail wagging the dog. If you had planned your healthcare bridge from 62 to 65, you wouldn't need the Social Security check, and you wouldn't be permanently reducing your income for the next 25 years. I'll figure out healthcare when I get there is not a plan, it's a wish. Let me give you the cutaway I've been holding. Somebody at a party, my plan for healthcare before Medicare, I'm pretty healthy. The same person at 64. How does Cobra work again? Back to Marcus. Marcus has been optimizing his 401k. He has been ignoring two things. First, his entire retirement portfolio is in a target date fund set to 2032, which will automatically de-risk, meaning shift toward bonds, starting about 10 years from his expected retirement. That sounds fine. What Marcus doesn't know is that this glide path was not designed around sequence of returns risk. It was designed around average volatility reduction. Those are not the same thing. A bond 10 strategy increasing bond holdings leading up to and through the early retirement years, then gradually reintroducing equities later, specifically shields portfolios during the vulnerable window. That's different from what his fund does. Second, Marcus's entire plan depends on claiming Social Security at 62. He has calculated his income based on that number. He has not run the scenario where he works until 65, builds a 2-year cash buffer, and delays Social Security to 67 or beyond. He thinks the early claim makes sense because I'll get more total checks. But he's assuming he lives to exactly 78. His father lived to 91. Now, let me make this concrete with an actual case study, because abstract percentages only go so far. Meet Dave. He is 52 years old. He has $380,000 in his 401k. He earns $85,000 a year. He plans to retire at 65. He is thinking about claiming Social Security the moment he turns 62. He has no health savings account. He has no cash buffer. Here is what his plan currently looks like. If Dave contributes $23,500 a year starting now for 13 years at a 7% average return, his existing balance grows to approximately $915,000. His contributions add roughly another $452,000. Total at 65, approximately $1.37 million. That is actually a solid number. Dave feels good. But then the expenses arrive. Healthcare alone over his retirement, $172,500 per person. That's before his wife. A couple can expect to need approximately $345,000 to cover medical expenses in retirement, excluding long-term care. Dave did not budget for this. His Social Security at 62, let's say his full retirement age benefit at 67 would be $2,200 a month. Claiming at 62 permanently reduces that to $1,540 a month. Over a 23-year retirement to age 85, he collects approximately $425,000 from Social Security. If he works until 65, delays the claim to 67, his benefit stays at $2,200 a month. Same 20 years, $528,000. He leaves over $100,000 on the table by claiming early. And that's without even counting the $240 per month difference compounding over years 67 through 85. Now, the sequence of returns. If Dave retires in a market down year and does not have a cash buffer, he is forced to sell shares at depressed prices in year one of retirement. Say the market drops 15% in year one. His $1.37 million becomes $1.16 million before he touches it. He needs $45,000 to live on. He sells shares at the low. Now he has $1.115 million. The market recovers, but the shares he sold are gone. They do not participate in the recovery. The compounding works against him. Over 20 years, this single bad timing event, not a bad decision, a bad calendar, could cost Dave between $150,000 and $300,000 in terminal portfolio value, depending on the recovery shape. The version of Dave that makes 3 changes, maxes catch-up contributions to $31,000 per year, builds an 18-month cash buffer before retirement to avoid forced selling in a downturn, and delays Social Security to 67 or later, ends up with roughly $450,000 more in lifetime income and portfolio stability. Same job, same salary, same market returns, different decisions about 3 specific variables. There are exactly 3 levers that matter in your 50s, not 12, 3. Contribution rate, specifically maxing catch-up contributions while you still can. Asset allocation glide path, specifically structuring the fragile decade so you are not forced to sell equities at the bottom when withdrawals begin. And Social Security claiming age, which is actually the cheapest guaranteed income you can buy, and most people give it away with a form they filled out at 62 because they were nervous. Everything else, the hot stock tips, the real estate crowdfunding apps, the option strategies your brother-in-law mentions at Thanksgiving, is noise layered on top of the foundation. Fix the foundation first. I'm in my 50s, I can afford to be aggressive. That sentence, said with complete sincerity, has ended more retirement plans than any bear market in history. Aggression at 55 without a sequence of returns buffer is not boldness. It is just an unprotected exposure to a risk that cannot be undone by time. You are out of the phase of life where time fixes mistakes. A 30% market decline at age 35 and a 30% decline at age 63 are not equivalent events. At 35, you buy more on the way down. At 63, you sell to eat. Completely different physics. This is where I land the plane. Marcus, remember Marcus? Marcus runs the numbers after a conversation with an actual fee-only financial advisor, not the kind who gets paid on commissions, the boring kind who charges a flat fee and doesn't care what you buy. Marcus discovers he needs to do 3 things differently. He needs to delay Social Security to 67 minimum, which means adjusting his retire at 62 timeline. He needs to build a 2-year cash buffer before he stops working so that he does not touch his equity portfolio in a down year. And he needs to redirect 20% of his bond allocation into a more aggressive position for later in retirement, not earlier. to compensate for the growth he needs to sustain withdrawals for potentially 30 years. Marcus still retires. He just retires 2 years later than planned, with a structurally sound plan instead of a number on a page that feels right. His dinner party friends still ask him for financial advice. He gives them slightly different advice now. Mock financial advisor voice because I can't resist. Look, at 62, you take the Social Security. Get the money while you can. The government might not have it later. Translation: your advisor is optimizing for the emotional comfort of having a check arrive in the mail, not for your actual lifetime income. Those are different optimization targets. Here are the 3 things you do with the information in this video. First, if you are 50 or older and you are not maxing your catch-up contributions to your 401k all $31,000 per year, or $34,750, if you're 60 to 63, you are leaving the most tax-efficient accumulation window of your life unused. This is not aspirational. This is the math of the catch-up window that closes the moment you retire. It is the last time the government hands you a lever this powerful. Use it. Second, build a cash buffer of 18 to 24 months of living expenses before you retire and keep it completely separate from your investment portfolio. This is your sequence of returns shield. Maintaining 1 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or short-term bonds means you do not have to sell investments during a downturn. This gives your portfolio time to recover without locking in losses. It is the simplest defense against the biggest structural threat to your retirement, and it costs you almost nothing in terms of lifetime return. Third, do not claim Social Security before you have exhausted every option to delay it. Run the break-even. Calculate the lifetime income difference. Factor in your health, your family longevity history, and whether your spouse will benefit from your higher earning record. The difference between claiming at 62 and 67 can exceed $100,000 in lifetime income over a long retirement. That is not small. That is a car, or a decade of travel, or the peace of mind of never wondering if you miscalculated. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the hardest part is that none of this requires you to be smart. It requires you to be patient in a system that constantly makes patience feel stupid.